Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Mental Architecture Building the Mind One Moment at a Time, based off of my book, which is available exclusively on Amazon. Today, I'm going to talk about the last section in Chapter 2, No Point in Time, which is Does Consciousness Equal Time Perception? So, if you haven't watched my video on unconscious time yet, which was just 2 videos previous to this one, I'd suggest you do that. In that video, I talk about how the brain presents information to you about time in discrete slices. So when sensory data enters into your brain through your eyes or ears or any other sensory organ, it has to be organized and disseminated by your brain before it's presented to your conscious perception. And so what researchers showed very likely happens to you is that you see things in discrete time slices. And so this kind of leads you to think about what is conscious perception after all but just a perception of time passing. Do you have conscious perception without being aware of time going by? And there's a researcher by the name of Hakan Liu who I want to share a quote with you right now that he said that kind of speaks to the persistence of this illusion that time is passing by you right as it happens, and that what you see is exactly what's happening. You know, the research shows that you're seeing your brain's interpretation of what's out there. So let me share this quote with you. When it comes to conscious perception, there seems to be something strangely persistent about what we see, hear, and feel. Even when a perceptual experience is wrong, we can't just mute it. Hakan Liu, neuroscience professor. So Hakan uses this example of a GAN, or a generative adversarial network, to compare from something from computers to how human consciousness works. So a GAN is a primitive form of artificial intelligence that basically takes a generator, which is used to simulate images of something, for instance, cats, and then a discriminator, whose job is to tell whether pictures of cats are real or fake. And so GANs are present in many different devices to be able to tell those apart, especially for object recognition purposes. The way your brain discriminates between objects is also very similar to the way that a GAN works. Sensory data enters into your visual field about an object that you see, your brain makes sense out of it, and you see whatever your brain determines that you see. This process is known as perceptual reality monitoring. And it happens all the time. I mean, for instance, when you're out driving and you think you see a big body of water ahead of you on the ground, which is known as a mirage, that is your brain basically sending you information about something out there that's false. But you see it still. This is what Hakan was referring to as a persistence of reality, or persistence of what you're seeing. Just it won't go away even if you know in your head that it's not real. Magicians and illusionists are experts at perceptual reality monitoring. They know how to fool your brain and trick your eyes into seeing things that you don't really see, and in turn your brain believes that what it's seeing is real. The reality that you see sometimes is a manufactured one, at least partially manufactured, by your brain interpreting what's coming in. And this can be very frustrating because it's hard to say, well, what is real and what isn't, when your brain is telling you this is what we're seeing. You have to know about what you're seeing. Like with a mirage, you have to understand that this is a limitation of your visual system that's causing you to see something that's not there. And it's not just vision that's subject to the errors of perceptual reality monitoring. For instance, in people who are amputees who've lost a limb, they sometimes report feeling like the limb is still there, and they can even feel pain, perceptions of pain, if something happens to that area where the limb is supposed to be. So the brain lies to them and sends them pain signals, and they even feel like a phantom sensation. This is known as a phantom limb. There's a very famous researcher at UCSD by the name of Dr. Ramachandran who wrote a book called Phantoms in the Brain that talks about exactly this phenomenon, where people feel limbs that aren't there and sensations that aren't there. Paresthesias is what they're called. And you don't have to be an amputee to experience these sensations. There are plenty of just normal stress responses that make people feel tingly and prickly and have these things that feel very real, even though it's really just your nerves firing off randomly. So this again begets the question, what is reality? What is your conscious perception? And we are seeing and feeling and hearing things that may not be there, but yet they become part of our integrated reality. How does this make your reality different than a dream? I mean, I know that's a little bit of a hyperbolic extension of the question, but if we have all these things happening in our daily reality that aren't really there, that isn't that different from some aspects of what goes on when we're sleeping at night. Now, not all perceptual illusions are irreversible. The ones involving phantom limb pain were thought for a long time to be irreversible, but Dr. Ramachandran was able to design some experiments and methods for helping people to overcome the sensation. You had to kind of like re-trick the brain in a way to get people to not have to experience and go through these sensations. So some illusions are more persistent than others. I'd like to share with you a quote from my book that talks about how our brain might act as a GAN, or generative adversarial network, all the time, taking the data that's coming in and trying to compare it against previously known information and trying to train parts of itself to better recognize objects. Distributed neural networks, including the hypothetical GAN, reveal how adaptable and flexible the brain is. Discriminating amongst objects based on their features, textures, and their surrounding context and correctly identifying them is just as complicated as accurately estimating time intervals, but the brain makes these abilities seem effortless. Regardless of the presumably discrete nature of conscious perception, the world appears to stream right before your eyes continuously, and it is this continuity of conscious perception that might be the grandest illusion of all time. And this quote brings me back to my original question, which is, does consciousness equal time perception? And I would argue, yes, it does. That our awareness of time passing is exactly equal to our awareness at all. I'm not saying that when you're consciously aware that you're basically looking at the time go by and that you're staring at your watch every second of the day. We know that's not true. But there is a certain truth to looking at what's going on around you and everything that's coming into you and being aware that time is passing. When you're asleep at night, you're not really aware of the time. In your dream, you're not staring at a clock going by or watching things go from sunrise to sunset like you do during the day. So there's a very strong element of time perception that has to be there for you to be aware and cognizant of the world around you and your place in it. That's it for today. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Mental Architecture. We'll be back next week and starting the new chapter 3, which is No Infinity. So I hope you'll come back for that, and I look forward to talking to everybody next week. If you have anything that you'd like to say, please leave a comment below, click like, and subscribe to this channel to watch any of my videos, and I look forward to talking to you guys soon.